All right, so hopefully after watching that crash course history, it kind of helped fuse in what we were learning about the Persian Zoroastrianism and the Persian Wars, and then also the Peloponnesian War, which he talks about, which is in the textbook as well. So there's several of these things that I hope by reading the textbook, watching some of my lectures, and seeing some of these other videos, hopefully it starts helping make these things more clear. So I'm just going to briefly go through this, though, just to highlight what we wanted to talk about. So this was a war fought by Athens and its empire against the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. So, in a sense, you can think about the United States, right? We had the states united to fight and kick out the British. And we went through that several times. But we had our own internal tensions over the issue of slavery, as we've talked about. And, we killed 500,000 of ourselves so that one portion of the United States, because they wanted to own human beings. And so it's not hard to imagine that any nation state that can stand united against a common enemy can fall prey to division and find itself being its own worst enemy to itself. So this was written about by Thucydides, a very important Greek writer that really left an imprint on the Western world. One of my professors that was a classicist in grad school was telling our class that he had a friend that was a speechwriter and that he was a classicist, and some of the speeches that Bush had sounded very similar, implying that perhaps some of these speeches were being used as models for some of the actions that Bush was doing and the things that he was saying in speeches. Now, I have no way to confirm that. What we do know is that if you read Thucydides and you read these speeches, and you listen to people like George Bush when he was getting ready to go to war in Iraq in particular, and other politicians, not just Bush. It's like our politicians have a great treasure trove of rhetoric to borrow from that just sits right comfortably into modern discourse. Now, there's always that question that historians pose all the time is, does the rhetoric that's being said coincide with the actions? Well, that's a whole other topic, but obviously I think you all are understanding my point. This particular conflict devastated Greece, and basically eventually Sparta would defeat Athens. Okay, it's a major influence. I'm going to skip through that. I'll let you read some on your own. You're supposed to look at some of the speeches in the My History Lab, links to primary texts, and so forth. I just want to give you this poem that was written by an English, a British poet named Auden. I believe he actually might have become a U.S. citizen at some point. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember. But in any case, this was I put except from. I meant to put excerpt. I just realized that. So pardon me. It's an excerpt from September 1st, 1939. It's a poem written by W.H. Auden. This is a section from this. And he says, I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Exiled Thucydides knew all that a speech can say about democracy and what dictators do. The elderly rubbish they talk to an apathetic grave, analyzed all in his book. The enlightenment driven away, the habit-forming pain, mismanagement and grief, we must suffer them all again. And this was really, we're talking about World War II here, but I just wanted to point out, because we're talking about how these ancient cultures have influenced Western civilization. Here, this educated poet was looking at the World War II and looking back at Thucydides and the issue of democracy versus dictatorship. I mean, it's a very powerful, right, legacy that the Greeks have left behind on this, on the moral lessons that are trying to be brought out also by Thucydides. Okay, so I just thought I'd point that out. Sexuality and gender in Greece. I'm not going to talk about this too much. This is, I believe, Zeus becoming was an eagle or a bird and seducing a young boy. I mainly pointed that out is that they were comfortable overall with things that we would consider bisexual, but it was a little bit more complicated than that. I'm not an expert on this topic. I was reading a book a while back kind of trying to explain it. But there were people considered passive and active. And I think, if I remember, that it essentially is that as a man that's a noble, you could be the active one and not on a young noble, which would maybe dishonor him. And so there was a certain set of rules and ideas about the context in which sexuality could be carried on between males. There wasn't just a straightforward idea of saying, okay, it's okay that men have sex with men and women. And women were certainly looked down upon and kept in a submissive role as well. And they were confined to the house. Okay, it's an interesting topic. There's a lot of books on this. And I encourage you to explore it because it does. The Greeks' view of gender and sexuality helps kind of us to think about some of the topics that come up now, which seem to still that we haven't resolved as a culture. Okay, so I just thought I would point that out. I'm just going to briefly go over Greek religion and the pantheons, gods that were immortal controllers of natural forces. Most of us have been exposed to stories about Greek gods, mainly from the Iliad and the Odyssey discussions in high school, because, again, in our literature and our history, most kids go to school in the Western world learning about Zeus and, Aphrodite and all these different gods. And then they're later going to get morphed under different names, but essentially the same by the Romans, just to kind of reinforce that, right? But if you don't know much about them, again, this is something I'd encourage you to look up on your own. What's interesting is that they have a lot of the frailties or the tendencies of humans: lust, adultery, being conniving. It's hard to see exactly where the gods are showing us to be morally superior to human beings. And their own philosophers kind of delved into this topic, which we'll go into at the end. So the epic poems, of course, we know is Homer. Again, that goes without saying. Hesiod did a theogony, which was the creation of the gods. And this was a systematic genealogy of Greek gods and the orders of the universe that he had lined up. What's important, I just wanted to point out, is that he may have been influenced by Near Eastern religious traditions. So again, we're seeing the links to all of the topics that we talked about so far. And the dramatists were also important. I'm going to come back and actually do a little bit more of a discussion about them, and we'll go from there.